All right, everybody. I was asked by some friends of mine and members of our car club to make a series of videos kind of explaining the process that I use to detail my car for the car show season. And before I got into that specific process, I thought it would be a good idea to just start off with a few videos on basics of detailing. Because you, like me, if you're trying to learn, there's a lot of terminology that's been thrown around that may not make any sense to you, like, paint correction, compounding, polishing, waxes, sealants, coatings. When I first got into detailing, I really didn't know what a lot of that meant. And I had some preconceived notions of what some of that stuff meant. For example, polishing. When I heard the word polish, I'm sure I thought what a lot of people elsewhere thought, like when you polish a shoe or when you polish something else, you're making it shiny. And you are, but that's not all you're doing, right? And then I thought waxes were just a way to make a polish shinier, and then obviously add some protection and things like that. And then, compounding, I honestly really didn't know what that was. I thought it was something that you did to, prep paint, which wasn't that far off, but it's actually a more aggressive form of polishing, if you will. So I'm going to get into all of that and explain it all to you guys first. But before I do, we need to start off by just talking about what is it about a car or paint job that you look at that makes you think, wow, that paint looks amazing, right? Well, there's a couple things. The first thing you think you notice is how shiny it is or how glossy it is. That's how a lot of just everyday regular Joes think about it. They look at a car, it looks amazing, and you're just like, my gosh, the gloss that's on that car. And yes, while that's true, what's making it honestly look as shiny as you think it looks is how pristine and flawless the paint looks, right? You can have a really, really shiny car, but if the paint has scratches, swirls, other blemishes or things like that, it's going to take away from the shininess because your eyes are going to gravitate to that, and those areas can't shine as much because you don't have a smooth surface there. The smoother a surface is and free of defects, then the cleanlier it looks. The cleanlier it looks, the shinier it looks. Think about your car when it's dirty. If it's dirty, it doesn't really shine too much. But once you wash it, even if you don't do anything to it except for wash it, it looks shiny immediately. It's the same thing for the coating in your paint. So to kind of show you what happens when you get the most common type of defect that we all get in our paint is a scratch, right? Now people call them all different kinds of names, right? You've got scratches, you've got micro scratches, you've got swirling, you've got marring. All of those are basically the same thing. It's a scratch, right? You have removed some of the top coat, clear coat on your car, right? And what that looks like to you, if you were to get down at the microscopic level and look at it from the side, is it would look like this, right? So I got a little whiteboard here. I'm going to show you basically the surface of a vehicle, all right? And so here, if you're looking at paint from the side on, your scratch is essentially a gouge or a valley in your paint. And your eyes see this because light comes in and it's coming in and it hits the edge, right, of this gouge and refracts back, and that's what your eyes see, okay? And so to make your paint look clean or free of contaminants, you have to get rid of these scratches. Now, there's two main ways to get rid of these kinds of scratches, all right? And the first one we're going to talk about is called a paint correction, right? Now, what does a paint correction do? Well, as the name kind of implies, it corrects the scratch. And how it does it is it permanently removes the scratch. Well, how do we do that? Well, if you have a valley, right, in your paint, what a paint correction seeks to do is very slowly whittle away this layer of paint so that way it falls, right, gradually. The more you whittle away, right, instead of being as deep a valley as it was, right, it starts to get shallower and shallower, and you keep whittling it away, right, until, you know, you have, you know, just something like that. And eventually you keep whittling away until you don't have this valley anymore, and then it's just one, you know, smooth surface. All right? That's a paint correction. All right? Depending on how bad your scratches are, that level of abrasion that you have to do is going to vary. You can do heavy, which in the detailing world, that's known as cutting, right? Actually, let me back up a little bit. You can do heavy, you can straight out sand the paint job down, right? So that's for like really bad paint jobs that you got to just sand away a lot. Then comes cutting, right? And cutting is usually done with products called compounds. And don't worry about the product types right now. I'm going to make another video where I'm going to run through the difference between a compound and a polish and a wax and sealant and all that, okay? So you get your cutting, right? Then you have polishing, right? So those are basically the three levels that you have, okay? So you've got the sanding, you've got cutting with a compound, and then you've got polishing. Now within those categories, you have different subcategories. So you've got sanding, light, medium, heavy, right? So you can sand it lightly, medium, heavy. Compounding, you can use heavy compound, medium compound, light compounds. Same thing with polishing. You can use heavy polishes, medium polishes, light polishes. There's even some called finishing polishes that are very light on the polishing side and more of the like paint refinement, you know, really making it look nice and shiny and smooth, right? So it all depends. And then all of those products will work differently on your paint depending on what pad you pair with it. So just like there's different products, there's different pads. There's cutting pads, there's polishing pads, there's finishing pads, right? And then there's within all those categories, different types of levels. So you've got a heavy cutting pad, light cutting pads, heavy polishing, light polishing. And then you've got different grades of finishing, some a little bit more firm, some a little bit more soft. And they all work differently on your paints, and they work differently with different products. Some products like to use a heavier cut pad, some don't, right? So it can be very overwhelming, is what I'm trying to say. If you're a professional detailer, you have to have an amazing arsenal of pads and products and everything, because you're dealing with all different types of paint types. I mean, every manufacturer is different. Porsche is going to make paints that are different than Mercedes-Benz and versus, you know, Chevrolet, Toyota, right? And so you've got, you know, different paints, you know, base coat, clear coats in different chemical compositions. Some paints are soft, some are hard. Some manufacturers lay a ton of paint on your car, some of them don't. So that is why you have to be careful on how you go about correcting paint. Now there's a second way to correct paint. So I showed you one, which is where you literally abrade it down, okay? There's another way that's more gentle, because you don't take anything away. And that's by filling that scratch or that valley, right? So I'm gonna draw that same valley again, right, in the paint. And now, instead of actually abrading this away, you're going to use a product and a pad that doesn't whittle away paint, and a product that contains fillers, and it's going to fill this in all the way to the top to make all of this level. Okay? Now, you might be asking yourself, which one should I go with? Can you go with both? Sure. And that all depends on what you're doing, okay? On what you're wanting to do. So let's talk about pros and cons of each one. So you've got paint correction, which is abrading away. Obviously, since you're slowly whittling away paint, you can only correct the car so many times until you're going to run out of clear coat, okay? So now the good news is that most vehicles, whether they're new, and even if they're classic cars, if they've been repainted, if it's a classic car within an original single stage paint job, you got to be careful with those, right? Or even if it's an older, base coat, clear coat, because you don't know how many coats they've put on the car. So you got to be careful when you're doing this a paint correction. And that is why in the detailing world, they always recommend start least aggressive and go up from there, right? So, and unfortunately, there's no easy way to tell you wow, that car needs a lot of correction or not. It's more of a gut feel or judgment. Like if you look at a paint job and it looks more or less good, pretty clear, and you see some swirling here and there, whatever, okay, that probably needs a light correction, maybe medium, okay? And so you're not going to take away a lot of clear. If you see another car that looks like, spider web, like swirls all over the car, that's going to need a more heavier correction. A heavier correction, meaning you're abrading more of the clear because you have either so many swirls or they're deep. You got to be careful how often you do that, right? Because you don't want to do that, say, every year, because within a few years you're not gonna have any clear coat left. The good news is that when you do that one time, that really heavy correction, and you maintain your paint and you do a good job of not running your show car through one of those automated car washes or using really abrasive methods of washing your car, and you use soft stuff to wash your car, you're going to minimize the amount of scratches and swirls and stuff that you put in it. And so you won't have to do a heavy correction all the time. You're going to have to do a light correction on a yearly basis, or but every other year basis. Or you can do the second method, which is the filling, right? So you can do a heavy correction one time to get your paint looking spectacular. And then from then on out, depending on how often you use the car and what you use it for, you can decide to either do light corrections on a every year or every other year basis, or you can just do filling. All right. So pros and cons, right? So paint correction, permanent. That's the pro. You permanently get rid of that scratch until you put a new one in, right? And so that's the key, right? And when you say until you put a new one in, understand every single time something touches the paint of your car, you are putting a scratch in it. Now, if you take good care and you use something very, very soft and you use good products, the scratches are microscopic. You really can't notice it, right? To the everyday Joe, you really can't see it, right? Over time, you're going to put more and more and more, and then it's going to become a little bit more noticeable. But just understand, every single time, you cannot avoid it. The only way to avoid it is to never touch your car, or, dust it with a blow dryer or something like that, which is not practical, right? You're always going to scratch your car. So if you are, if you have a daily driver, right? You're out in the elements. It's getting rained on. Birds are having a field day on it, right? It's getting dirty. You're going to be cleaning it more often. If you're going to be cleaning it more often, you're going to be putting more scratches in it, right? So it doesn't make sense to do a correction on a daily driver because again, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It doesn't make sense to do a correction all the time on a daily driver because, like I said earlier, you're going to eventually run out of clear coat, okay? So maybe you do a combination of, hey, I'm going to do a correction to get it good. I'm going to watch what I wipe with my car. And then every 6 months to 8 months, I'm going to detail my car with a filler, right? That covers everything. Okay. So the pro is, again, it's permanent, but because it's permanent, you're going to be whittling away paint. So the con to it is you're whittling away paint. That's the main con. So you've got a finite amount of time that you can do it. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer as to what that finite amount of time is. It depends on too many factors, right? How good is your paint? How thick is your paint? If you got a car straight out of the paint shop and they went with 3 coats of base coat, 5 coats of clear, and then they wet sanded it and buffed it down to 4 coats of clear, you're going to have a lot of correcting ability in there, especially if you're taking care of it and you're just going light. If it's a 30-year-old car and you don't know when it was painted and how many corrections it's had done, I don't know. You'd have to have a professional try and assess how thick your paint is to go from there. So unfortunately, there's not a really good answer. That's why it's a good rule of thumb to just start with the least aggressive and then see how your paint looks. And if it looks good, then do your best to maintain it and go from there. All right. The fillers. The pro about the filler is you're not abrading any of your paint. Okay. So it's, you're just filling the scratch. You're not removing any paint. And so aesthetically, it looks the same, or it can look the same. Like somebody walking by your car at a car show is going to go, wow, man, that paint looks, completely flawless. Little do they know that it's not. You've just filled in all of the swirls and scratches. The con is that fillers are temporary, right? Over time, as you detail the car, right, you spray it with quick detailer or you wash it or something like that, the fillers are going to go away, right? There's a way to make them last a little bit longer. Once you've added filling products, you protect it. You put a layer of sealant on it or wax or a coating or something like that, and it protects from the elements, right? It forms like that hard outer, boundary against UV and rain and stuff like that. But those things wear away, and eventually, when they do, your fillers start to go away, and you're going to start to notice that areas that that you fill that looked good over time, they're going to start to become a little bit more noticeable. The scratches coming back. Okay, so now you have to ask yourself, what makes most sense. So, again, if it's your daily driver and it's not a daily driver that you also use as a showpiece or something like that, really, it's up to you. I mean, if you really don't care how it looks, then you can decide not to do either of these methods, or you can be like, screw it, I want it to look good, but I don't want to have to maintain it by having to go in and do fillers every so often. Go ahead and get a correction, and then just do your best to not put more scratches and stuff in it, and then you're good to go. Or if it's a daily driver and the paint job's kind of old and it's not as you don't know how much is there and you don't want to really do a huge correction on it or anything, or keep doing that, you can go in and just use the fillers every now and then, right? On a show car, right? So the videos that I'm going to be making are specific to my classic car that I show. Okay. It's garage kept. I try not to ever let it see a drop of water in the elements. So if it looks like it's going to rain or something like that, I don't drive it. I try not to go to shows where it looks like it might rain. And it's garage kept, right? So as a result of that, it's a little easier for me to maintain the fillers. I can use fillers and they don't wear out as much because it's not getting rained on. I'm not constantly washing it or anything because it's not getting super filthy and dirty. So I use fillers a lot. But in order to make those fillers work better, I do a light correction at the beginning of the year, right? To set the paint and have it be a clean foundation, right? So we'll get into more about that, the specific, corrections versus fillers and stuff in other videos. But I just wanted to make one video to start off to just give you the basics of, hey, what is a scratch? Why is it that we see what we see? It is the dominant form of paint defect that leads to your paint not looking as clear. And if it doesn't look as clear, it looks dull. And if it looks dull, then no amount of wax or anything you put on it is going to make it look great. It might shine, but the same wax you put on your car with, dull paint or paint with defects in it is going to look nowhere near as good as a car parked next to yours at a show that has the same wax and everything done on it, but it has perfect paint or near perfect paint or corrected paint. It's going to look deeper. It's going to look wetter. It's going to look, more glossier. It's just going to look more clear. Those cars that you see that look like mirrors, like the paint looks like it's a sheet of glass. Those are cars that have had their paint corrected. And I used to always think, when I saw cars like that at a car show, in my mind, I always thought the only way a car looks like that is if he just got it out of the paint booth, not long ago, or they don't ever drive it. Like it's a trailer queen and they just bring it to the show and then they take it home and it's in a bubble and nothing ever touches the paint for it to look that good. And it wasn't until I learned about detailing that no, you can make a 15-year-old paint job look like it just came out of the paint booth if you correct it and then you properly maintain it and use the right types of towels and stuff like that to minimize the amount of scratches and all that other stuff. And how I found that out was inadvertently at a hot August night show that I was at. Somebody walked by my car a little bit too close and they left a decent scratch on the fender. The Adams Polishes booth was right around the corner, and I went over to them and I didn't know anything, right? I had always heard the term, oh, it'll buff out, right? I didn't really know what that meant. Like when someone said, oh, it'll buff out, like I in my mind, I thought, you kind of blow on it and, I didn't know. So I went over to them and I'm like, hey, I got a scratch on my fender just now, can it, quote, buff out? Like I had no idea what that meant. And so they actually came over to my car and they looked at the fender and then they said, yeah, this is not too bad. Give me a minute. And the gentleman ran back to the tent and he came back and he brought with him three things. He had a small little orbital polisher, cordless, a bottle of a polish, and a microfiber towel. And he took that bottle and he put a little bit onto the pad that was on the orbital, and he kind of wiped away the paint, made sure it was dust free, and then he started running the machine. The same machine I'd seen 1,000 times on television or something like that I always associated with someone putting a layer of wax down on a car just a lot faster. He started going to town on this thing. And remember what I used to think polishing was. I thought polishing was, oh, you're just making your paint shinier. You're not. I never put two and two together that a polish was removing defects. So I'm watching him do this on my car and the scratch is disappearing in front of my eyes. But not only is the scratch disappearing, the area that he did when he got done with it looked deeper, richer, clear. Like it looked like what I would associate with new paint. Well, when he got done, now I had this spot on my fender that looked brand spanking new compared to the rest of the fender. And I'm like, oh wow, I thought my fender looked good. Now it doesn't compared to that. So he went ahead and he did his best to kind of do the rest of the fender and kind of blend it in, right? And so it wouldn't look so obvious that, oh wow, there was a spot right there that just got corrected. But it showed me how much micro swirling and stuff that I had on my car, that it wasn't making the color on my car look as deep and as rich as it could, right? That's why I said what I said earlier, where swirls and scratches can make your paint look duller, right? If you don't know any better, you're just like, oh wow, it looks amazing. When you remove it, it's like, oh no, it looks super rich and deeper. So after that, I was hooked. I could never go back. I could never go back to not having correct paint because I would forever see those types of scratches in my car. And I also knew that the potential of my paint was not being met. So if you want to compete at shows and have a good shot at standing out, you have to create separation in the eyes of the judges, right? And if the judges go into a show and look in your category and they see 10 cars that all kind of look the same, in terms of like paint wise, but then they come to yours and they, even though they don't know anything about detailing, something in their eyeballs is going to tell them this car is different. Like all those other cars, they look good and they look shiny like that. But this one, man, that paint is just like on point and it's super clear and whatever. That's an extra point on their judging sheet, or maybe 2 or 3. Who knows, right? It could be the difference. And I like to quote something that if anybody watches, Bitchin' Rides on Motor Trend and Dave Kindig and Kindig Designs, Kindig has a great saying when it comes to cars. And he's like, there's 3 things that make or break a car, right? And he says that stance, sound, and the last thing he said was paint, right? So think about it. When you're at a car show, your car's not on, right? So they're not going to hear it. So that leaves you really with 2 things that are going to naturally gravitate a judge to your car. Stance, how that car's sitting, and that paint, right? And so you want to grab their attention. You want them to take a moment to just stop and look at your car. And if the paint catches their attention, then guess what? Then their eyes start moving to your engine bay and then to your interior and then maybe to your trunk if you've got your trunk done, and they start to take in your car in totality. If you can't grab their attention, they're just going to keep on walking by. They're going to look at your car and they're going to be like, okay, that's nice, but it looks like the other half dozen that I've looked at. So that's why I spend so much time in prepping my paint on my car. The other reason why, too, is because I have the most unforgiving paint that you can have on a show car. It is black, right? So in the detailing world, people will tell you black's not a color. It's a full-time job. And boy, are they right, okay? More than any other color, black has to be on point. You have to spend so much more time because it doesn't hide anything. It shows everything. So you don't have to put in as much work on a lighter color car. Silvers, whites, yellows, right? You don't, right? Because it hides more. The paint actually hides more. Paint with metallics hide more because the metallic flake grabs people's attention and tends to hide. I don't want to say hide the swirls, but they're not as noticeable, right? If you got metallic in your paint, especially high flake, and it looks decent, right? But when you've got a plain, smooth color and it's dark, a black, very dark gray, dark blues, greens, or whatever, when the sun shines on it, you're going to see almost every scratch. And you're also going to see, if you didn't do a good job wiping or buffing, you're going to see streaking, you're going to see watermarks, you're going to see all of that. So it's very meticulous. So that's another reason why I got really heavy into detail, because, if you're not careful, a black car can turn out looking bad, even though you put a ton of work into it because you left streakiness or you've left an area undone. That being said, in my opinion, and the reason why, even though it's so much work, I will never not own a black show car, is because when it's done and it's done right, my personal opinion, it's virtually unbeatable. Because for that reason, a lot of judges know, man, it takes a lot of work to get a black car to look good, not only on your body work, right? Because the same thing, if your body work's not straight, if it's wavy, you're going to see it going down the car. So if your black car looks straight and it looks clean and it looks shiny and glossy and your paint looks deep and rich, I mean, it's a magnet. It's a magnet. And I've noticed it as I've progressed in my detailing of my car, starting off with doing nothing but just wiping it down with a quick detailer and putting a coat of wax on it, to now, I haven't repainted my car since I bought it. I bought it in 2017. I never repainted it. And every year, as I refine my technique and I refine my process, I get more and more comments about, wow, what did you do to the paint? Did you repaint it? And I'm like, no. haven't repainted it, and I get a lot of questions about what products are you using, what are you using, which has now led me to this video session because people are asking me, they want to know, and they suggested, you should make some videos. So anyways, so this is video number 1, intro, right? Basics, what is a scratch, what is a defect, and how do you go about getting rid of them so that you lay a base foundation on your paint, okay? The next video that I make, I will go into the differences of the products used in paint correction. So we'll talk about compounds, right? And then we'll talk about polishes. I've already kind of talked a little bit about it in this video, but we'll get more into, how they're supposed to work together and all that stuff. And then how they pair with different pads. And then I'll make another video talking about the pads themselves, going through like, all right, these are all the different pads that you have, what they do, how they're supposed to work with the compounds and polishes that I just explained, right? Then I'll go into another video talking about what goes on top of a corrected paint. What am I talking about? Stuff like waxes, sealants, the stuff that we normally associate with shine and protection. We'll talk about that. And then once I have all those basics laid out, then I will speak specifically to all of my products that I use, my pads, my towels, the process that I use on my black car, and then we'll finish it up with a series of videos of showing you how I'm actually doing stuff on the car. So hopefully you like this introductory video of, anatomy of a scratch, and how to go about fixing it and just basics of making your paint look good. Stay tuned for the follow-on videos.